I'm Carla Trombly. I'm with DBSI, Senior Vice President of Banking Transformation, and I have the unique opportunity where I spent 20 years as a client on the banking side and now on the vendor side, trying to really help multiple FIs across the entire nation kind of execute on their strategy. And then today we have a panel of industry leaders to really help us kind of dig in and talk through technology in our branches. What does it mean? How do we do it? Do we do it? So to get started, we'll start with ladies first. Introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Leslie Higgison. I lead the strategy and performance for our physical channels. So it's everything that our customers need to engage with us IRL, as the kids might say, in real life. So that's everything from our distribution to design, programming, our workforce optimization, internal communications, and also our ATM channel soup to nuts. I spent over a decade at Truist Bank by way of SunTrust and had the opportunity to do a lot of exciting things the bank had not done before. So things like standing up a net new customer segment from the ground up, teammate-led innovation programs. And then there's the 2 years that I try to forget sometimes of putting two giant banks together, a merger of equals during a pandemic when we were all at home helping our kids with their online school while also trying to get this done on a timeline. So I'm really proud of the teams that we built and the lasting impact that they have had and the positive change that they continue to make. I started my career in management consulting, and boy, that trial by fire sure did prepare me for the wild ride we're all on in banking today. I'm based in Atlanta, live there with my husband and two children. They're 11 and 9, so we are on the basketball court, in the baseball fields and soccer fields a lot. But when we're not doing that, you could probably find us in the kitchen having a dance party, in the backyard watching movies, or planning our next travel adventure. But I'm delighted to be here with all of you today and also our esteemed co-panelists. Thank you.
Now I've got to follow that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we do.
I'm Stephen Griffin. I'm with Regions Bank and manage retail network distribution. I've been with the company for about 30 years now. Worked in various roles from incentive management to data analytics and data management, and have been working in this the network distribution area now for about 12, 13 years. We started that group. I started that group for the bank. Prior to that, had been in our corporate real estate and operations group. I am from Birmingham, Alabama. Like I said, been in banking. I walked out of the University of Alabama and walked into Regions Bank, and have been there ever since. Did have a brief stint where I transferred to AmSouth and worked for them, and then we merged right after that. So I guess it still counts. They're all together. We're from Birmingham, Alabama. I have 5 kids, 4 of them in college, 1 starting college next year, 1 of them graduating college this year, thank goodness. We are always busy on the go with them. And like I say, I love Birmingham, Alabama. If you've never been, we've had some conversations with a few folks in here about the barbecue and stuff like that. We are a really big foodie town. But Regions is a strong presence there, and I've loved working for them for the years I've been there. So glad to be on this panel. Looking forward to some inspired discussion.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here. My name is Lamont Young, and I head digital and omnichannel banking for Citizens along with our national bank. I'm going to keep my remarks very brief because I think what you guys are most interested in, obviously, is our opinions on today's topic. But just a brief part about me for all of you guys. I am not a banker by trade, although banking has been the bulk of my career. I started my career out in the fashion industry. So be careful about what advice from me you guys actually sort of listen to. You want advice on sneakers, on suits, I'm your guy. Be careful about the banking advice. I'm just kidding. So happy to be here, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Lamont. All right, let's get right into it. Advice. How do you turn retail branches into advice centers, and how are you using technology to help you? Let's start with you, Lamont.
I'd say start off by having some really honest, candid meetings with your HR team. Because in order to turn your branches into advice centers, you've got to invest in your people sort of first. Credibility amongst your people is probably the most critical thing when you're trying to transform branches from transaction centers to advice centers. They have got to be, in most cases, reskilled, in some cases, sort of upskilled, in order to be the kinds of colleagues that customers will listen to and take advice from. I think it's also important because I know a lot of you guys are on this sort of journey around, how do you take data and utilize data to be able to personalize experiences for clients across the board? That same data that you're using to populate personalized experiences in your mobile apps or through direct mail or email or those sorts of channels, those are also investments that you can actually sort of make into your people. Credibility is going to be sort of key in making that transition from a transaction center to an advice center. From a technology standpoint, I think one of the biggest keys is just making sure that you don't forget while you're investing in your mobile apps and your ATMs and your ITMs that you need to make sure that the technology that actually drives the experience inside of your retail network is also sort of up to par. The last thing you want to have is have customers have this wonderful experience in your mobile app or have a fantastic experience when they call in your contact center and they go into one of your retail branches and your retail colleagues are using technology from the 1970s. Mm-hmm. And that actually sort of shows. And so, my biggest thing is have a balanced strategy in terms of investing in your channels. But most importantly, invest in your people because they are the key to transforming your transaction centers into advice centers.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about make sure your technology is up to date. If you're carrying a message of being digital first or digital savvy and your customers are using their digital app and then they walk into the branch and you've got the TV on the wall that you could change the channel, like we used to have to do for our parents and run around and turn the channels for them. We were the remote control back then. If you've got that up, if you got outdated technology, your machines don't work, such as if you're using ITMs or as we call them VTMs, and they're not necessarily working right. And you take that associate goes and puts the card in and says, "I'm going to show you something really neat. This is how you can make your deposit and talk with someone." And then the machine goes down. Well, then you've got a problem. That customer is going to look at it and go, "You just captured my card. I don't have my card you just issued me from your card issuer machine. I got to go back in and get this, and I'm never touching this thing again." So if things aren't working well and you're rolling and you're trying to push it too fast, I think that can definitely lead to a problem. But I also think, as we're arming our associates to be those advice centers where they have the technology and the tools in the branches like we do at Regions, where they can sit down and make an assessment of the customer and know what they need and give them those next steps and advice. And you have, lead generation software and things like that can help you drive that. Make sure that that's got to work right. That's got to truly match what they're looking for, because if you're giving them advice on something they don't need, then basically that experience for that customer didn't go where you would like for it to have gone, and it's not going to lead to future sales and revenue growth.
Yeah, all of those things are true for us as well. And I find that really starting with our colleagues and equipping them with the tools that they need to provide that consistent professional grade experience from branch to branch. Who in here has a lot of turnover in their branch workforce? Anybody? Nobody, right? Nobody. Lifers, all lifers, right? So we have folks who 2 weeks ago were maybe folding sweaters at the Gap. Mm-hmm. And now they're delivering advice around the most important moments in our clients' lives. So how do we ensure the quality and consistency of that advice? It's by equipping our colleagues with the tools to do that, to know our customers, even if they've just met them that day, right? So I think a lot of the focus sometimes on technology can be what's the shiny tool and toy we can implement in a branch. And that stuff's really cool, and that might drive people in the door. But what really has a lasting impact is helping our colleagues build those relationships through trust. Mm-hmm. And so if we focus on that, it's not just about what we can do, but what we should do. And I think what Lamont touched on around having an integrated strategy across your channels is really important. And for us in particular, we cannot afford to do all things really well in every channel. And so where do our customers, what jobs do they want to do in which channels? How do we prioritize investments in those things where it may not be a blanket, hey, we're going to be great at that initial interview around needs assessment in every channel. We really want that to show up really well in our branches, for example. We're going to do some more simplistic things through our digital channels. So I think it really comes to understanding your customers and what they need and how do you meet them where they are and serve them versus saying, hey, we've got this really cool stuff we can do for you that they don't even want.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you all say, so oftentimes when we talk about technology, we think about the box. So like a TCR, an ITM, the flashy thing that you're hoping will be implanted and then just deliver. But what I'm hearing you say is that AI, data, really using technology to enable your team. Can you talk a little more about that? We'll start with you, Lamont.
Well, I would remind everybody that we still remain in a people-based business. I sat on a panel in Vegas a couple weeks ago talking about this same subject, primarily focused on millennials and Gen Z, and the sort of fallacy that millennials and Gen Z don't want to ever talk to humans. It's just not true. Now, they get their advice from places that are probably traditionally different than what folks that are a part of the boomer generation and Gen X actually do. But when it comes down to really complex issues with their finances, whether they're talking to a trusted parent or relative, or they're talking to a banker that they trust, like they all want really good advice and ideas. And this is where investing in your people, ensuring that your folks have the right tools and the right training to deliver sort of what I say trustworthy conversations with clients over the course of time. And that's where I think the real big sort of win comes in. So I just would not forget about the fact that in banking, we're a people-based business, and particularly here in the U.S., money is just a deeply personal thing. By all means, you can find ways in which you can use technology to connect with consumers, but money here in the U.S. Versus any other country that I know I've studied is just inherently personal. So remember those personal connections.
Yeah, I think, from the standpoint of AI and the data and understanding your customer and what they need. I mean, I think as we move into the future, and it's funny, I laughed when you said millennials and Gen Z because I have a Gen Z, and I can't tell you how many times I get a text about the kid has probably saved 90 cents of every dollar he's earned, and I get, hey, Dad, what about a CD? Should I be looking at a CD? What about an IRA? I'm like, you haven't even graduated college yet. My other kids are over here talking about what computer can I buy with the money I got last week, or what Pokemon card I can buy, and all that stuff. But truthfully, he wants that connection. He needs that connection. He looks to me because he knows I'm in banking, but I'm like, son, they don't let me touch the money. They don't ever want me doing that again. I was a teller for 6 months in training, and they decided that was not the career path for me. But the point of that is as we start moving in the future, AI is going to start helping us inform those decisions. We're banks. We're going to be slow. Some of the larger banks might move a little faster than most of us in the room, but AI can be a big and scary word right now for some of the banks because of they're trying to figure out how are we going to use it, what are we going to use it for. But those tools we're providing, if we can gather the information on the customer, know what the customer's about. Also, if you've got robust data on your segmentation, you talked a little bit about that in your introduction, and the segmentation, who the customers are you're dealing with, and you've got AI there helping you summarize that information. I think in the future that's going to be a powerful tool, because that's going to help direct that advice and guidance that customer's looking for from an associate. To your point, that may just be starting, and all of a sudden they're armed with all this information that is going to move them forward with helping that customer, and they're going to feel empowered. That's the biggest thing I can see that it's going to do for us on the front line for our branches in the future. Not to mention, I'm sure there'll be lots of digital, advertising and things like that we can work with and function with that. But that's one of the most positive ways I see it affecting advice and guidance.
Yeah, I think all of those things, and also the fact that the analytics, that richness really gives our colleagues the opportunity to provide that recommendation of the next best offer. And so it's not just using that really talented colleague's perspective of, gosh, I think this would be a good idea, but it's also just based on repeated experiences across markets, right? So it really broadens your perspective of what our customers might be open to, what might serve their needs. we've been doing things like co-browsing on tablets, right? And that helps with the digital literacy for folks who may not be there yet, gives them the confidence so that they don't have to drive to the branch the next time they have the same challenge. So, we're always cognizant that folks come to see us when they hit a road bump and they need help, right? They need that confidence of another human being across from them, helping them through the situation. And so we want to make sure that we're building that confidence in that moment, but also so that they can empower themselves to manage their finances on their own as well. So certainly about advice in the moment, but also helping them build those skills so that they can do it on their own.
Yeah, and the reality is when customers are coming in, they want advice, but they have way less time than they have ever, or time that they're willing to give us. So it's really important that we're enabling team members with technology, with the data, with the insights, so they can have meaningful conversations quickly, but also accurately. Customers, I mean, I call it the Amazon effect, but they don't have a lot of time. So when they come in, expect you to be able to deliver. So how are we enabling our team members with technology to ensure that they can deliver regardless of what that customer's coming in for? Absolutely. Okay, so we've been talking about the things that work well. What's some technology that you all have implemented that just didn't work out the way you thought? And what are some lessons learned?
I'll start with some things we did when we first came out with our new branch design back in 15, 16, and started rolling that out. We were relying heavily on the what some call ITM. We called it a BTM.
What's an ITM, just in case we have anybody in here?
If anyone doesn't know, an ITM basically is the ATM that you can talk to a live associate on. You have a one-to-one connection with them, and they can help you run a transaction. They can help you solve a service issue, and things like that. So I'm fairly certain most people are have seen those before. But it's we rolled it out, and we were the heaviest user of them. I mean, we had probably 180 machines out there within about 4 or 5 years. We're really investing in the technology, and what we found is our customers just did not adapt to it. Now, maybe we were too soon in the area for that, but we gave it a long journey. Gave it about 8 years to see how it worked.
I'd say that's more than the college drive.
That was more than the college drive. And then now, you've got the updates and upgrades that have to happen with that new technology, and it gets to be an expensive proposition for something that people aren't using. Interestingly enough, one of the things we did find is we did have a couple of rural areas where we had done some remodel work, and we just tested it in those to see, does it really work in those? And they were some of the highest adapters because they were so used to going through that drive-through and having a connection with somebody. And they wanted to talk to somebody, and they didn't know they were talking to somebody in Birmingham, Alabama. Sometimes they're like, you're new at the branch, things like that. But yeah, I'm new here. But again, it for reasons that we surveyed, we tried to understand, it became privacy was a lot of the discussion about it. Our customers, we have a lot of rural branches in our markets. They just didn't really trust the technology and the privacy of it. We had a couple of surveys that came back to us and said, I don't like being videoed while I'm doing my ATM transaction. I'm like, well, you were, but that's not what this is. But that was the understanding. We probably didn't do as good a job of branding it as we should have. And it was new technology, and people just weren't really used to it yet. We've gone back. They still use it as an ATM. We've gone back and retrofitted them back into ATMs now, and they're doing fine and working as we intended to. But that really did not work for us.
Well, we took it a step further. So we gave it 10 years, and we also had digital-only offices. So essentially where the tellers didn't have access to cash, everything was through the ITM in our lower volume offices where we see less traffic. And we thought, this is great. We're going to have tech-savvy customers that are going to come in. They're going to speak to the agent over, the monitor. But what we found was when people want to speak with a person, they want to speak with a person, not a person on a screen. Like, I'm not going to drive 15 minutes to go talk to somebody on a screen. I can do that from my sofa on my mobile phone, right? That's silly. So why are we asking our customers to do that? We did have some limited success in certain markets, as Stephen mentioned. But ultimately, right, we debunked it with the facts because people said, oh, you know what? People in rural areas really love these. People love the after hours access. People love the additional capabilities they can do. I said, well, can't really do much other than an ATM. And by the way, we're getting lots of complaints that it takes me longer to do what I need to do because I have to go through all of the authentication prompts of the ITM. I'd much rather just go through an ATM, punch in my PIN, do my transaction, off with my day, right? So anyway, I think it's a great story that something that may have served a purpose at a point in time, you always have to sort of revisit your strategy and ensure it still works for your customer base, right? What suits one organization and their customers may not be suitable for yours.
I'll add on to that too. At the end of the day, one of the things I spoke about earlier that really affected us and impacted us was we were early in the game with it. You know, like I said, we were the market leader in ATM and VTMs for a while, and the technology was still flushing out, so to speak. And so we were on the front end of that. But like I talked about before, that experience with a customer and that when you're introducing it to them may not always be positive. Well, then they're once you've lost them like that and they see that it really impacted them, it ate my card, and I just opened an account with you. This is not the experience I was looking for. Okay, you know, and then the associates lose confidence in it, so they don't want to go spend the time showing them. They just tell them to use the ATM. You know, so that you really have to make sure whatever you're rolling out into your branches, whatever you're putting in there technology-wise, that it's gone through the rigors. It's gonna, yeah, there are going to be hiccups, but it's got to be functional and work.
Yeah. So we spent some time a couple years back trying to create a unified account opening experience across all of our channels, and this was sort of prior to Technology 2020. And I think the biggest challenge that we ultimately found is instead of creating a singular platform that enabled clients to be able to quickly get through an account opening process, what we did was we created 3 different hamster wheels that only actually frustrated both customers and sort of colleagues across the board. So I think that the biggest sort of lesson for all of us when we did that project was first and foremost to break down sort of silos. Rather than sort of having your retail team come up with their version of the truth and your digital team come up with their version of the truth and your contact center team come up with their version of the truth, get all your people into a room and reset what the truth actually is about what you're trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, remind yourself that what this is about is not necessarily the way things used to work, because that's what you ultimately get when you start to be very channel specific. Well, the retail team was like, well, hey, I used to do these checks and balances, and I checked off on this box, so forth and so on. And what you end up creating is a better version of what you already have. What we've done this go around, now we've got a sort of new platform, a platform called Vista that we utilize. We got a bunch of really smart people in the room and just sort of said, if you were a customer, right, how would you want your experience to sort of be? And that was the sort of objective viewpoint that we had all of our clients, all of our colleagues, take a sort of look at. And what our colleagues did was they came together and they built a solution that just simply made sense regardless of channel, because instead of thinking about their jobs to be done, they thought about themselves as sort of consumers. And so I'm not giving you guys any sort of words of wisdom on this one. All of you guys sort of know that if you start truly with what the client's needs are, you're going to build yourselves a better solution. The biggest problem, though, in our industry oftentimes is we put the client experience sort of on the back burner, and we start to focus on some regulatory thing that you got to factor in, or there's some big gigantic goal that you got in the back of your head that you got. Like, that is the sort of key focus. It's one of the reasons why in my space we joke all the time, like half of the fintechs that you guys do business with today would not exist if banks truly started off thinking about themselves in a very customer-centric manner, right? There would be no Stripe, there would be no Square, there would be no PayPal if banks really started to think about the experience that we're delivering for clients.
Amen to that. Yeah, and we heard a little bit about this yesterday and today. It really is about bringing together all your decision makers and then coming to that table with no is not an option. So you cannot say no. It's all about how. So technology has a piece, operations, marketing, all of your barriers for success need to have a seat at the table when you're talking about and really driving home that customer experience. And the goal cannot be no. No is not even an option. It cannot be in your vocabulary. It is not, it's like you have to put money in the jar if you say it. And the ultimate goal really is how. How are we going to make changes? How are we going to impact that client experience? How are we going to bring this to our branches? And ultimately, it's about that yes and how. So how, speaking of how do you see technology really evolving in your branches? Do you see it expanding? Do you think we've hit the catalyst here? Or do you see that there's additional opportunity kind of in your kit of parts and the future of branching?
I think we're nowhere near the ceiling, particularly from an analytics perspective. I think you have to think about the whole experience, as Lamont has mentioned. It's not just about the tech. You can't just have a strategy about the tech. And by the way, you can't just have a strategy about the branches either, right? So I think for me, what I see is the learning that we have is how do you meld it together with the human experience to maximize the tech. And by the way, it's not always sexy stuff. Like some of the most impactful things we've done are things like AI-enabled client-facing procedures. Like procedures, the most boring and mundane thing we all do, right? But it's been really helpful to make sure that all of our colleagues have at their fingertips the resources that they need to confidently serve our clients in the moment. And the faster we can give them that information, right, if they don't know it off the top of their heads, then the better that experience is overall, right? And by the way, we're also then managing the risk too.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's not either or. You can do it at the same time, but it doesn't always have to be really shiny and exciting. Just really useful.
I think you nailed it. Every time we think about something that's new, I've heard it coined here a couple of times, the bank of the future. We've talked about that. I've been hearing that since 2010, right?
Yeah.
We all talked about that and omnichannel, the two big words that you always hear at the conferences. But, once I started in this and started looking at it and thinking about the bank of the future, I realized it's not the bank of the future. It's the bank of next week because it's all moving fast. Let's face it, we're moving faster than we've moved in a long time in the technology space out there. And so I really don't like Bank of the Future, but because it's just changing like this. Because as soon as you think you've got it figured out, it's the next thing up. But it is that enablement, and it doesn't have to be the big. We all thought about the big, bright, shiny objects, and yes, we want to carry our brand and our design and things like that. But you've got to also look at the other things that are going to help make that a successful space. Because it doesn't matter how good looking that branch looks, if you don't have the right people in there to drive what you need to have driven, and to help grow that branch and to put the support behind it that it needs, to where they come in and they say, that experience from top to bottom, soup to nuts, was everything I was looking for. I got everything I wanted out of that. And the biggest piece of it was that associate really guided me, and having them the tools that can help them get there, and whatever other capabilities we want to put in the future as it grows, that'll help them make sure it's aligning with what our message is.
I won't reiterate what my esteemed panelists sort of said, but I would like to tell you guys sort of a quick story around how data really does enable experiences for clients. So our CEO often talks about banking being a noble profession. And at first, I think the first time I heard that, I just thought, wow, this guy's drinking the absolute corporate Kool-Aid. but coming from somebody who was an absolute non-banker, seeing real stories of how banking helps customers, I think sort of brought it to life. So I'm going to try to tell you guys a quick story around how our investments in data really did create what I consider a shining moment when it comes to banking. So I require my team to go out and do retail branch visits, usually once a quarter. I was out in one of our branches right outside of Boston and happened to be sitting on a banker call with a young couple, married couple, probably in their late 20s, both saddled with a whole heck of a lot of student loan debt. They have gone to colleges in New England. If you go to know anything about New England colleges, they're very, very expensive. Anyway, based off of the prompts from our systems, our banker began to have the conversation with this couple about student loan refinance. Well, it turns out these guys were able to help this young couple refinance their student loans, saved them almost $7,000 a month in with $7,000 between the two of them, between graduate loans and undergraduate loans. And that $7,000 a month worth of savings was going to be something that would allow these guys to buy their first homes. So I sit back and I tell you that story, not because of the $7,000 in savings or the investment that we make in data and analytics, but a reminder that we help out real people every single day. There's some young couple who somebody in your branch is going to help buy their first home, right? There's some kid who's going to be the first in this generation to go to college because some loan that you guys absolutely offer. There's going to be somebody who has less anxiety tonight because they spend a little bit of time with your banker and they feel like they're going to be able to retire in a couple of years. And so remember to not only invest in the technology and data that drives the experience, but understand why you guys do this every single day. Those stories are the kinds of stories that I think will help you and your senior leaders and your boards and that sort of thing as a reminder of why we got in this business in the first place.
Yeah, so if there's one message we hope that you kind of take away from today is that technology isn't there to replace your FTE. Technology should be team member led and assisted. It should implement, it should help, it should enable the experience. It is not, and oftentimes for quite some time, it has been something that we hope to implement and we could scale back on FTE, go cashless, and just have, a few people there giving advice. And customers across the entire nation have said no. That is not what we want. We have made an educated decision to walk into your branch because we expect a person to sit down and solve a problem for me. So your technology, whether it's today, tomorrow, or in the future, really should enable what your customers are saying they want from you. And overwhelmingly, customers say they want advice. So before we wrap up, we're actually going to open it up for questions. Does anybody have some questions for this esteemed panel?
Let's first give it up for this esteemed panel. So we probably have time for, I'd say, 2 or 3 questions. This is when I wish the microphone was a football. I could just throw it at you. We have a gentleman right here.
When you say that you got rid of your ITMs, so you put them back to ATMs or regions, does that mean you went back and put tubes back in? Or?
No,
okay.
The ITM, VTM, we basically the ATM is just a piece of software you turn on and turn off inside the ATM, and we left those ATMs, functional, and they were deposit smart ATMs already. So that's all we really did there. It just took away that video functionality that they could call into the customer service center on.
We did the same, by the way, but we are also looking at where we want a physical drive-through window versus a drive-through ATM. Generally, we're seeing that the majority of those transactions are deposits and withdrawals. You could probably do it a lot quicker just through an ATM. And frankly, those tubes, as you know, are a big pain in the rear end, and they're always broken. So, we're looking at some of that but independent from the decision to discontinue our ITMs.
We actually, when we were building some of our newer branches, the VTMs were there in place of the drive-through. Now, many of them we had a commercial window in that. And one of the big learning lessons that we got out of COVID was, boy, you need to have a touch point if you can. And so we've pretty much kept those commercial windows going.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody over here? Question? Oh, over here. Jump here.
Great presentation, great insights. I love the video story. That was a great story. We track trends, and one of the trends now, and we've done some research on it, is seamless. So omnichannel to seamless. So can we talk a little bit about what is your seamless strategy? I know JP Morgan Chase made a big thing in the news about their move towards seamless. What's your seamless strategy? Do you have one? Are you looking at it? And how does that impact your customers?
We strive to get there. Maybe that's the best way to say it. I think for us, we absolutely know that's what our customers expect. I think being able to do that practically with antiquated bank systems is a challenge. I think we're looking at how do we plug the gaps in the meantime through information, most importantly. But that would be how I would say it. It's a bit aspirational at this point, but certainly we're on the journey.
We're probably at the crawl phase of crawl, walk, run. We sort of created an approach that ultimately sort of said, take what we build in mobile and apply that actually across the sort of other channels. So if you sort of think about almost every microservice that we actually built today for the mobile app is now reusable across our branch network, and it'll be reusable across our contact center. We strategically placed our IVR and our chatbot on the exact same set of functionality so that no matter how you choose to actually chat with us, whether it is through the IVR, through our chatbot, literally you are dealing with the same set of functionality. And then our CRM is now actually built to be universally absorbed across each one of those sort of channels. So I would love to sort of say where Chase is, they're 10 times the size we are, but we certainly think we've got the right approach in sort of saying, look, one singular digital platform can power all customer interactions across the board. Probably easier said than done because we still are coming up with certain roadblocks, but that is the approach, and we think it's a sound strategy.
Cool. That being said, let's hear it again for this esteemed panel. Thank you very much.